This hillside Hokianga farm is in for a busy day. 50 new feral goats are being delivered to bolster the herd. The new arrivals are all nannies captured from the wild, and Felix and Rita Shard will leave them to fend for themselves, high on the steep hillsides. The Shards had difficulty finding anyone in Northland to supply feral goats, so they're relieved to find musterers Pete and Claire and to make use of their skills at moving the animals. Rita and Felix had a grim experience with their previous herd.
We had about 150 goats 3 months ago or 4 months ago, and a pack of dogs mauled about 120 goats, and we were left with 30 goats. It was heartbreaking.
Horrible.
Yeah, it was absolutely horrible.
The musterers will bring down the 40 goats that survived the marauding dogs and cull most of the bucks. Of course, the working dogs are kept under strict control. But when a pack of dogs attack, nannies and kids are first to be killed, so it's largely billy goats that remain. Shortly after Rita and Felix bought the property, they dreamed about making a living from cashmere goats.
We got all the wild ferals out of our bush, which was a big job. Once we had them all, we bought about 2 bags, and then we had excellent fibre after 5 years. And we had just told the sheriffs, please come. And we saw on the news the whole cashmere trade had collapsed. We could just forget it overnight. It was so sad. It was a big shock. But we kept at least half of our goats for weed control.
Without the goats, we never would have managed to get a clean farm around here. They eat the ragwort, they eat the thistles, they get rid of the lantana, the blackberry, the brackenfern.
Good fencing is essential to keep goats away from desirable plants. But the Shards believe many landowners underestimate the value of goats as farm animals and can't get past the idea that goats are pests.
They are clever, they are agile, they run onto the rocks.
And they look so beautiful, all the colors.
You don't need sprays, you don't need weed killers, and you get fertilizers through their bumps.
They're slow releasing pebbles. They're not doing cow poos, you know, cow patties. So it stays in the grass, and then slowly, it's like a fertilizer that is there for a long time. And the grass gets better every year.
I think farmers who do not recognize the value of goats are just not knowing what those goats can do. I never would farm without the goats.
No, me neither.
Once the Shards had fenced off their bush from goats and wild pigs, they set about trying to restore the trees and bird life by controlling smaller pests. Felix was shocked to learn how many mice, rats, possums and stoats had made their home on his property. He was determined to get rid of them with traps and poison baits.
We know from ancient records that the bird life in here was so plentiful. And if you go now in the bush, it's dead silence, eerie silence. And I would like to bring that part of the valley, which is ours, right back to the same stage where we have all the birds frolicking and singing.
With a background as a civil engineer and his tendency towards Swiss precision, he mapped out the bush into grids and began a systematic program to saturate the area with 300 bait stations spaced every 80 metres.
Sometimes I'm in the bush and it's cloudy and you don't know any direction anymore. And I have my map and I have every station on the map on my GPS. If I have an accident, I can radio to Rita and I can tell her at this and this coordination or this and this point, get me out.
His efforts have impressed Mike Knight, Pest Control Officer at Northland Regional Council.
You're now seeing the results of your effort. You know, there's a lot of work gone in. The bird life is back in.
I know,
That's
it's
very
fantastic.
much evident, yes.
You can hear them frolicking.
Well, your regrowth in the top of the trees is just absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, I know. I really love it. You know, it's so full of life. You know.
Yeah.
Mike says it's remarkable
Yeah,
to achieve such
happy
good
to do
results
that.
in
It's
just a few
fantastic.
years in steep, inaccessible bush. In all, Felix has trapped and shot 3,500 possums, although it's his least favourite job on the farm.
Yes, I don't like to kill any animal, even if we butch for ourselves. But the possum is a pest, and we do it very humanely. You know, the possum is always in a trap. We as well have these traps, you know, which the possums are covered. So if you don't have the time to kill it straight away, it's under cover, it's away from the sun and the rain. And we really care for the possum until it's got to die. But unfortunately, it's got to die. And I don't like it at all. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Bringing back the birds and restoring the bush helps to enhance a very unusual feature of the block, which at first was hidden from view. The shards were introduced to the future potential of the land during a failed attempt to capture wild goats high in the bush.
Because they are more agile in the rocks than us, they ran across the valley and laughed at us and said, not today, no way, you can't get us. And that's how we found the valley. 4 years after we arrived, the upper part, we didn't know anything about it.
After that discovery, the boulders on the shard land were to become a much greater asset than they could have imagined. 2 decades later, their property has become a popular Northland tourist attraction.